Hello, I'm Heather Holst-Knudsen, the CEO of H2K Labs and your host of the Revenue Room podcast, where we talk about accelerating revenue, driving profitability, and fueling enterprise value by leveraging data, digital, and AI. Before I kick off with our next guest, I'm excited to announce Revved Up 2025, which takes place February 25th through the 27th in my beautiful hometown of Sarasota, Florida. Revved Up 2025 is an invitation only gathering and brain trust for CEOs and their revenue critical C suite teams leading multi sided businesses such as media, events, data information, marketplaces, and professional networks. I launched Revved Up for several reasons. I'm passionate about empowering our industry to set the rules instead of relinquishing business value to tech platforms. With AI now a permanent fixture, it's crucial to transform threats into opportunities and define the rules of the game ourselves rather than handing over revenue, profits, and enterprise value to somebody else. The second reason is that there's clearly a gap in the market when it comes to events for us as an industry, and I want to fill that gap. We need new faces in the room, we need future forward serious discussions, and we need cross industry and cross functional convergence. It's the only way we'll be able to identify the white space opportunities with the speed to which we need to do it. Most importantly, we need to take this discussion from 50,000 feet down to 10,000 and 5,000 feet. It needs to be realistic. It's time to take the conversation about data and its role in driving significant and sustainable enterprise value and move it to center stage. This discussion should leave you neither confused nor bored, but instead equip you and your teams with actionable strategies and playbooks to implement back at the office. It's about making existing revenue streams better, improving profitability, launching new revenue streams, and creating defensible competitive advantage. It's about CEOs helping CEOs learn how to navigate this increasingly complex race course. No one has all the answers, but together we can form them. So if you're a CEO and you have an amazing C-suite revenue critical team, you need to attend Revved Up. Go to www.h2klabs.com/revved up with two V's to learn more. So with that, welcome to the Revenue Room, where we dive deep into the strategies driving business growth and innovation. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a true renaissance man of the business world, Peter Cohan. Peter brings a unique perspective that spans across academia, venture capital, and strategic consulting. As an associate professor at Babson College, he shaped the mind of countless entrepreneurs and business leaders. But Peter doesn't just teach business, he lives it. Through his firm, Peter S. Cohan and Associates, he has led over 150 consulting engagements and made venture investments that have resulted in over $2 billion in exit value, including early investments in companies such as SoFi, Andromedia that was acquired by Macromedia and now part of Adobe Systems, SupplierMarket.com, an online marketplace for industrial supplies that Ariba acquired in 2000, and Lexar Media, a digital media company that Micron Technology acquired for $690 million in 2006. Peter is a prolific thought leader, serving as a Forbes senior contributor, and he has just released his book, Brain Rush, which explores the business implications of artificial intelligence. His insights into retail and technology have earned him recognition as a Rethink Retail top expert for 4 consecutive years from 2021 to 2024, and he was named a top AI leader in 2024. What makes Peter particularly fascinating is how he bridges the theoretical and practical, from teaching strategic decision making at Babson to advising CEOs, from writing about emerging trends to making early stage investments in transformative companies. Peter, welcome to the Revenue Room. We're so excited to have you here and tap into your wealth of knowledge.
Thanks. I'm honored to be invited.
So I gave your background, but tell us a little bit more about your professional journey, because it is quite interesting.
Yes, well, I'm a very strange person. For instance, when I was a freshman in college, I told my dad, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a poet. And I love telling this story to my students because they cannot believe that their strategy professor wanted to be a poet. And so the theory is that what he said, I don't remember any of this, but he said, okay, Peter, look up poet in the yellow pages and see if you find anything.
That's
And
great.
I guess the story goes on. I didn't find anything in the yellow pages. So I tried a bunch of other things and finally landed on wanting to be a strategy consultant working on helping high tech companies to grow, which is pretty much where I ended up. So that was very fortunate that I went through a lot of failures before figuring out that that was going to work. And it really has. I started programming computers when I was about 13, and I was really interested in computers. So I don't know how I got interested in consulting, but it's really the perfect thing for me because I'm just interested in learning new things, and my curiosity can never be quenched. I'm always trying to find out new things and try to understand, what's going on behind things that are going on in the world. So I'm extremely curious, and so that's really a good fit for me.
No, it's actually, well, one is I have a coach I go to, and she always tells me failure is actually, or fail is actually find.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
that's
hard,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and consulting allows you actually, if you are so curious, to really get involved with lots of different companies and dive deep into their opportunities and challenges. So I totally get that.
Yeah,
Um,
one of my favorite things that I do with my students is something called five whys analysis, um, and it's really fantastic because you can do it for any kind of problem, and it's based on something that was developed by Toyota, and it turns out that the great grandson of Toyota was a Babson graduate, and so always like to mention that when we talk about five whys analysis. But essentially, you look at the biggest problem facing a company, and then you ask why, and then you turn the answer to that into a second question. You keep doing that, but the only way it works is if you keep finding out real, concrete, on the ground facts that explain the answer, and you keep digging. And so that kind of analysis is perfect for me because I'm like a 6-year-old kid always asking why. And this is something that students can take and apply to their careers after they graduate. It's very valuable.
oh, I love that, the five whys analysis. And then obviously in manufacturing, we hear a lot about Toyota because of the other things they've done since, like I think Lean and Six Sigma. Um, But let's go to your book,
Yes.
Brain Rush. Brain
Yes.
Rush tackles one of the most transformative technologies of our time, generative
Mhm.
AI. And you've taken an approach by not just explaining the technology, but mapping out the entire industry value network and its economic implications. What made you
Mhm.
decide to focus specifically on the business and economic aspects rather than the technology itself?
Well, it goes back to sort of what motivated me to write the book. Back many years ago when I was in graduate school at MIT, I went to work for a startup founded by a former MIT professor, and it was trying to roll out an expert system, which is a form of artificial intelligence. And I can talk more about the product if you want, but the punchline of the story is that the company failed. And the reason the company failed was because it was a really innovative, great technology that was not solving a customer pain point in a way that was superior to existing products that were on the market. So
Hmm.
that sort of was an early lesson of entrepreneurial success that continues for decades. I mean, it's sort of a timeless lesson that a lot of engineers think they have this great new idea and everybody's going to want to buy it, but they're unable to look at the technology from the perspective of the customer who needs it to provide more value than competing products. Otherwise, why take the risk of buying from a startup? Why even go there? So that is sort of the motivating factor underlying why did I write the book this way. Another thing that I did was I wrote 3 books about the dot-com boom. My first book about the dot-com boom was called Net Profit: How to Invest and Compete in the Real World of Internet Business. So in that book, I also use this idea of breaking down the industry value network and trying to understand what's driving the attractiveness of the industry and also what is going on with the winners and losers in that industry. So I thought the same thing would be very interesting to examine for generative AI. And the thing that motivated me to sort of trigger me to write the book was in May of 2023 when NVIDIA reported a spectacular forecast of growth. And that forecast made me think, wow, this AI thing is really causing a lot of capital to be allocated, and this could be a really big thing. And I immediately had this gut reaction that I need to write a book about this. And so I wrote a book proposal, and I talked to a bunch of publishers, and I got a publishing contract, and I started writing it in July, and it came out a year later.
No, and I think this is really critical and important at this point in time because as you and I were chatting before the podcast kicked off, you know, when Google and the web entered center stage in the 2000s, um, it dramatically impacted the industries that we serve here at H2K. Anything, media, events, anything marketing related, right? Because no, you
Mm-hmm.
were no longer the trusted source. Yeah, you went to Google, and Google started owning the traffic that went to your site, so you became heavily reliant on this ecosystem. And then Google got very much enmeshed in the actual ad technology side of things,
Yes.
um, and it really disrupted those businesses fundamentally. And I saw it firsthand, with Thomas. But to me, right now, the AI this disruption feels like 10x the early 2000s because of the pervasiveness of it. It's like affecting not just marketing and information gathering and knowledge acquisition. It's how you work. It's how you're putting things together. It's there's operational efficiencies. It could be embedded into products to make your products better, and it's so fast. It's like mind blowing. I mean, so I think under helping CEOs and their teams understand not just like the tech part, but where do I start? Right?
Yes. So there's a couple of points I want to make. The first point is to talk about how people are actually using this technology, how businesses are using the technology. And what I developed actually after the book came out, I was thinking about it and thinking about what kinds of applications people were developing, and I came up with this idea of the value pyramid. So envision a pyramid, and the bottom layer where most of the applications are being built. What you have is people using the technology to overcome creator's block. I mean, I would have said writer's
Yeah.
block, but since they're using it for other things besides writing, I just broadened it to creator's block. So the thing about creator's block is that it's something that is good, it's helpful, it kind of speeds up the work, but it also doesn't provide a source of competitive advantage because anybody can use this. Any company, anybody can use this technology and use it to overcome creator's block. And if they have an idea but they can't figure out how to get started, it will help them with that. The next level up, where there are fewer applications, is improving functional productivity. What do I mean by functional productivity? I mean things like improving the efficiency of coding, customer service, and to some extent marketing and sales. Taking processes that are essentially within a particular function, and I think one of the key things that makes it work so well, especially for things like customer service and marketing, is that what it does is it studies the kinds of words that the people who are the best at doing customer service use in interacting with customers in different kinds of problems that they're solving. And they train this AI to take somebody who maybe was waiting tables 6 months ago and now just started customer service on what to say to a customer so that they will get that customer ticket resolved as quickly as possible. So I find that really interesting. Essentially, it's knowledge management. There used to be this thing called knowledge management a few decades ago, maybe 10 years ago or more. But basically, this is a form of knowledge management. You train the AI on the things that the most talented people say when they're trying to solve a customer problem, and you make that available to the new person. And so that increases their productivity. So anyway, that's the second level of the pyramid. And the top level of the pyramid, which has very, very few actual applications, if any, is the one that involves creating new growth curves. So one of the things that I teach in my strategy course, and I'm the course chair for the undergraduate strategy course at Babson, and one of the most important ideas that I'm trying to get across is that you cannot rest on your laurels. Any kind of growth business that you may create will ultimately mature and die. And so while you're having the cash flow from the successful business that you've got, you need to reinvest it in new growth curves. And the same thing applies to generative AI. Generative AI is at most value when it is enabling companies to create new growth curves that accelerate their growth rate. And the reason growth is so important, and this is something that I learned from basically going on CNBC starting many decades ago and talking about tech stocks, which at the time when I first did it, I remember being absolutely petrified, being on television for the first time and not really knowing the answer to the questions they were asking me, like what tech stock should I buy and why? And I was thinking to myself, I don't really know what makes stocks go up and down. But after having studied this for several decades, I've narrowed it down to one thing that's easy to say and hard to execute on, which is you have to grow faster than investors expect every quarter, and you have to raise your forecast every quarter. If you do that, your stock price will go up. If you're a private company and you do that, that will increase the value of the company. So the need for expectations beating growth is critical and essential. And if generative AI produces expectations beating growth, then it will increase the value of the companies that are doing that. Having said all that, if you break down, say, the 200 to 300 applications that a typical large company is trying to develop for generative AI, what you'll find is that only maybe 5 or 10 of them are being released inside the company, and then maybe 1 or 2 are being tried outside the company. And the reason for that reluctance to get that outside the company use of AI is because of fear. You have the sort of two fears, actually. You have competing fears. You have the fear of the CEO, who is afraid of getting left behind by not investing in generative AI. And you have the fear of the board of directors that's afraid of the company's reputation being destroyed by hallucinations and then being sued because of some repercussion from those hallucinations. So between those competing forces, you're kind of trying to figure out how do I come up with something I can actually release and make useful that will not cause all these problems. So the punchline of the story is that there are very few companies that are actually using this technology to create new growth curves. And I've studied a few of the ones that have been doing it, but they really haven't revved up to full speed yet. So it's kind of early days in that.
And my next question actually was going to be, of the companies that you see that are actually leveraging AI to fuel the growth curve, um, can you give some examples of the few that are doing it?
Yes, and I will say that the ability to quantify the amount of revenue they're generating from this is a little bit difficult. But there's a company called ServiceNow
Oh
that I
yeah.
have talked to a lot. I know the CEO very well, and I know some of the top people there. I've been very fortunate to have talked to them, and they've been rolling out generative AI agents, which are sort of a new concept. In my book, I had my last chapter was about what is the future of AI. That one of the ideas was agents, basically meaning that instead of having AI do one part of a job, you kind of give it the entire job to do. For instance, you could say, I want a marketing campaign that's going to increase the number of high quality leads by 20%. And the AI will create a bunch of pieces of software that will work with other pieces of software out there and solve the problem. That's the theory behind it. So this is one thing that ServiceNow is doing. They started off doing customer service tickets, and now they're using it for other applications like new employees trying to sign on for benefits and get their office and all that kind of setup done, and other applications where it's a cross-functional process, and they are using AI and agentic technologies to sort of execute an entire process, which essentially takes away sort of a piece of grunt work. When Bill McDermott, the CEO, always talks about it as sort of mindless things that people don't even want to do, and it just does it for them. And so basically it leaves them time to do more of the high value added thing. I've also talked to a couple of companies that are using this technology for customer service for their customers, and their customers are able to grow fast because the customer service application solves the customer problem faster and more effectively than a human does. It's also less expensive, and because of the high quality of service, it raises the net promoter score, the willingness of the customer to recommend this company because of the high quality of service. So those are very promising examples. The third one that I learned about fairly recently is Salesforce, which for a while had been sort of moribund and not growing very fast, notwithstanding the fact that whenever I go to San Francisco, I stay at this hotel right across from the Salesforce Tower, which is just this a large building that's very expensive and always makes me think, whenever they decided to build this, they must have been at their peak of hubris. Having said all that, they've introduced this thing called Agent Force, which I've been talking to some startups just in the last couple of weeks that are using this, and it's a way of doing this sort of agentic technology, agentic approach, which essentially solves an entire problem from beginning to end. And companies are actually adopting it and using it, and the growth is really rapid. And I think that in future quarters, it's going to actually translate into increased revenue growth at this company. So these are early indications of the use of this technology for creating new growth curves, which is personally really important to me. And I'll leave you with one other thought, which is when I wrote about the dot-com boom, there were 2,888 IPOs of dot-com companies during the dot-com boom between 1996 and 2001.
Wow.
So far, there have been zero IPOs of generative AI companies. And I find that to be very indicative of where the energy in this industry is coming from. The energy in the dot-com industry was coming from startups that were disrupting existing established companies that didn't want internet to be around. They were just hoping it would die. It would run out of money and go away, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. The generative AI is being driven by huge companies that are operating cloud services platforms. And so that's really where the impetus is. And, there are some companies that are doing this that really lack the creativity that a startup would have, and they're having trouble monetizing anything but the use of the cloud services thing. They're not like, I'm thinking about Microsoft. Microsoft has this thing called Copilot,
Yeah.
and it's all over all my documents, and it's like the Clippy used to be. It's like, I don't want that there. Get rid of it. It doesn't do it. It doesn't. It's not any value for me. And I feel that when I first started writing about this, and last year there were forecasts that it would be generating $30 billion in revenue, and they still don't have enough revenue to even be worth counting or reporting. And when I use the product, I find myself so underwhelmed by the value that I feel as though if a startup were doing this, maybe they would be more concerned about the value that they were creating with the technology.
Now, this is such an incredible point that you've just made in terms of like these legacy businesses and AI and the startup arena. Because if you look at it, Microsoft's advantage is that they have customers that have tons of content and data flowing around, right?
Yes.
And you need the content and the data in order to make AI work. It
Yes.
doesn't work without the data asset.
Yes.
So if you actually look at an industry that is poised for a growth curve opportunity utilizing this new technology, it's media. Why? Because with media and events, let's say, but they're more discrete one-off, events, but there's but with the media, you've got a website, you've got social channels, you've got an audience where you have tons of data, not only data they tell you, they give you, but purchasing data, the decision cycle along to the purchase, which is more relevant in B2B than B2C, and preferences. I mean, like opinions, if they are liking stuff or sharing it. So this environment is so rich with the data
Yes.
that the AI opportunity is huge, but they could potentially blow it by
Yes.
making deals with these AI platforms because those AI platforms don't have the content, right? So this is
Yeah.
a very important topic.
Yes. I mean, you think about the startups that are the AI startups. The most well-known one is OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, and there are a number of other ones. But I don't really think of that as a startup in the sense that it is so dependent on the 13 or 14 billion dollars that Microsoft invested in this company, and a lot of the money is going to giving them credits for using the cloud service that they have,
Oh,
Azure.
right. Yeah, I heard about that.
And the other interesting thing is to go back to what is generative AI. What is the technology underlying it? And it's something called a transformer is what it's called. And a transformer is a neural network that essentially estimates the probability of different words coming next in a sentence. So the transformer technology that was developed in 2017 by some Google researchers who have all left Google to start their own things, which is an interesting point that they all left and didn't stay there. But that is really at the core of the technology that's being used for generative AI. And my point being that OpenAI and these sort of large language model providers are trying to get as much data as they possibly can, and they've run out of data, so they're creating new data to train it. And what that does is it increases the error rate tremendously.
Yeah.
And so, in technology, there's this concept of garbage in, garbage out. And what's going on here with this, ceaseless appetite for new data is that a lot of garbage is being introduced into the model. So when you have garbage in there, the probability that the next word you're going to predict is going to be completely senseless increases. So this is another concept I talked about in the chapter of the book where I talked about the future was, and this is not really a great new idea, but it's small language models. It's basically, instead of trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink into training the model, you just train it on your own internal data that you verified before you put it into the model. So when you were talking about all this different kind of data that's out there, what you really need to do is clean out all the data that's irrelevant to the specific problem you're trying to solve, and just train it on known good data that is very, very relevant. Therefore, the error rate is going to be going down because it's being trained on stuff that is most directly relevant to the problem that it will be asked to solve when somebody types in the query.
No, absolutely. And again, I'll just bring the media side into this again, just because it's one of the industries we serve. Is if you actually look at, and I use ChatGPT and Claude a lot to help me with the brainstorming stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like, it only takes you so far, right? And it does start repeating the same things over and over again. You're like, well, this isn't really original. Um, if you look at the smaller mid-market niche media businesses that go super deep into like
Mhm.
a vertical, and the people who are using it, like let's use a B2C example,
Mhm.
needle pointing.
Okay.
Okay. And it's called there's a name for this kind of media. Anyway, it's people who have hobbies.
Yes.
Um, and so people who are going to needlepointing.com, one is all of the content is written about needle pointing, all different types and needle sizes and threads, and how do I do this? And then if they have a forum, there are questions like, oh, I was doing this and how do I solve that? And users are engaging back and forth on this problem solving together.
Mhm.
It could also be that there's a purchasing opportunity where I can buy thread and my canvases, and so you've got purchasing data based on different types of needle pointing levels. So you've got all of this data on needle pointing. And so if I'm actually trying to do something about needle pointing, or I like that's not in chat GBT right now, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
but that's where the opportunity, I think, lies. And another comparison I want to make to what you were saying, like they're trying to make data now, like create it
Yes.
out of the blue. It's kind of the same thing that happened when um, you know Google came out and everyone wanted to be part of the top of the search results. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, everybody became a blogger
Mhm.
and a writer and an expert, and it was fake, and people got sick of it. So,
Yes.
really interesting points. Do you?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
Go
sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one more thing really quickly, which is, I talked about the concept of competitive advantage before. If you are using your own data to solve your own problems, that's not data that should be shared outside of your company. And if it's not shared outside the company, then it gives you some sort of proprietary expertise, particularly if whatever business you're doing, whatever function you're providing to your customers, is something that you have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge about and expertise. And so if you're building a business on something that you have, you're providing unique value and it's hard for other people to copy, that is likely to be a better investment. Putting on my venture capital hat for a minute, that is basically the kind of business that you would want to be in. So when you consider the nature of the information, you're looking more for that than you're looking for a huge amount of, huge amounts of tokens, as they're called, that are just everything that they can sweep into this. That some of which is relevant, some of which is irrelevant, and the irrelevancy stuff is increasing the odds of hallucinations, which damage reputations.
Well, actually, here's a little. At one of the speakers at our event, Revved Up, is actually has a whole community about SAP. It's
Yes.
called SAP Insider,
Mm-hmm.
and the CEO is going to talk about how they actually they've shut off the walls to any any outsider getting their data, because there's huge amounts of information here because of the
Yes.
community and interaction.
Yes.
And they've built their own LLM that they're using, or to take this to build their growth curve.
Yes.
So he's actually be sharing that. I thought that
Yes.
was
That definitely is the kind of thing that should work. It should be a successful business.
so. This,
Um, Go ahead.
it touches on something though that you brought up, and it was my next question, which is the impact of this on value creation for these companies, and the shift that this may be having on whether it's venture capital or private equity or strategic M&A, on how an acquisition target is is identified, viewed, and valued. Do you
Hmm.
see changes happening there with the advent of AI?
Well, I see the potential for it to um, be a tremendous value creator. There's one industry where one of the sort of the secrets, the thing that I think is people are not talking about, but I think is a very important reason why so much money is being invested in generative AI, and the number is something like 150 billion this year, maybe a trillion over the next several years. The reason that so much money is going in there is because people see it as a way to ultimately cut costs, to cut
Yeah.
people, and nobody wants to say that. Um, but having said that, there is one industry where it is actually being used to reduce the number of people. And so if you are a private equity investor and you're looking at acquiring a company, um, and it can replace people with AI, this is a way to earn back any purchase premium you may have uh, spent to acquire a company. And the industry in question is gaming, video game designing. I've been
Interesting.
talking to the CEO of a publicly traded video game designer who has asked me not to mention his name, but I've known him for the last year. Very interesting, creative person who told me that he is reducing the average size of his game development team from 100 to 150 people down to about 25 people. Um, and if you kind of think about all the different gaming development teams that are out there in a particular company, and you can reduce that many people by using AI to do coding. It can do coding much more efficiently. It's like, and then the other thing it can do is it can do the artwork. There's a lot of generic artwork in video games. I'm not a video gamer, but there's a lot of video game artwork that's sort of backgrounds and skies and oceans and whatever, all of which can be done without a person. AI can do those things, and it doesn't really matter, if it's like Picasso quality art. It just has to be, it's sort of a background thing. So essentially, by using the technology, you can reduce by something like 80% the size of the teams that develop the games. And gaming is like venture capital. I mean, game development is like venture capital in the sense that it's risk. You don't know which one is going to be a successful one. But in this industry, because of the economic conditions in that industry, namely that you have a lot of companies that were developing games and operating games because people were using them so much during the pandemic, and now people are not using them so much because they're going outside and they're not playing so many video games. So there's a drop in demand. Cash flow is going down. Some of these companies are, on the edge, like Ubisoft, and so companies are needing to um, get more efficient, and they are able to pull the trigger on layoffs in a lot of different companies in the gaming industry. And generative AI is one of the things that is enabling companies to do this and continue to operate effectively.
I actually was introduced to a startup in gaming, the development side, who was trying to solve this very problem,
Mhm.
because game development is super high risk and very expensive. I should actually go follow up with him to see if he's using if AI is part of this, but it's crowdsourced gaming development is a
Yes,
part of it.
yes.
Uh, so okay, so here's something that I talk about a lot, and I think you touch upon it in your book, which is there's a stat out there by Gartner that says that 86% of CEOs know that AI is going to have a fundamental, profound impact on revenues, their P&L, their competitive advantage, right? But that same 86% are like struggling to figure out where to start and invest. I think that has a lot to do with what you said before about those two fears
Yes.
colliding. But
Yes.
there's other stuff going on too, which is I think the fear of making a huge expensive mistake,
Yes.
trying to justify this and explain it to the board, and also how do I keep my business going, right? My existing business while I'm trying to achieve this growth curve. Which, by the way, outside of this gaming example, it's not a headcount reduction. It's in many cases you need to hire new people because you need that data science and the tech capabilities.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I guess there's one thing I have been talking about that I find very relevant, and I wrote about it in my first book, which is the distinction between the relay race approach to product development and the rugby approach to product development. Those are two different things. And in the and I guess the first one, the relay race approach, is sort of an extreme example. It's just, but to tell a story, it's I found it really compelling. Basically, the idea is that each function takes the output of the previous function and just executes it. So the important concept is that the engineers were considered in the relay race approach. The engineers get the baton first. They develop the product that they think is a cool product, and then they pass the baton over to the manufacturing person, the person in charge of manufacturing, and say, "Build this." And the manufacturing person gives the engineers some lip and says, "You know what? This is going to be too expensive to build. It's going to have a high error rate, but you're the boss, so I'll do it." So they build them whatever the engineer asks them to build, and then they have all these widgets that they've built sitting on the loading dock. And the head of manufacturing calls the head of sales in and says, "Okay, now you have to go out and sell this." And the sales force looks at what's sitting on the loading dock and says, "Well, this doesn't meet their customer needs. It's too expensive. The quality is low. They'll never buy it." And so that's sort of analogous to what most CEOs are doing with AI, which is sort of saying, "Look, we need to do something with AI, and I'm going to hire a chief AI officer, and they're going to figure it out." And what that does is it puts a technology person in charge of what is fundamentally a business problem. And the AI person probably doesn't know a lot about what it's like to sell or manufacture or service the product. They know about the technology, but they don't know how it can be used to create value. So this is where the other approach comes in, which is the one that I called the rugby approach, which is also called rugby because of this thing in rugby called the scrum. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
have never played rugby, but I watched it on TV. And I see all these people putting their arms around each other and trying to get the ball to go down the field. So to apply the Scrum concept to AI and to product development more generally, the Scrum concept is that you put together a team of all the people involved in essentially design, manufacturing, delivering, servicing the product, and other people all together in the room. And you say, "Okay, now I want you to develop some new growth curve for this company. And as the CEO, I know that if it can have these attributes, it will be successful in the marketplace." And then you call in your early adopter customer. The early adopter customer is the one who always wants to be the first one to use a new technology, and they're very excited about co-developing the product with you. So you have your early adopter customer come in, and the team that's the scrum that the CEO has put together listens to the early adopter customer about what their unmet needs are. What is the pain that they're feeling that maybe this company can solve with AI? And they build a prototype of the solution, and the customer says, "Yeah, that's about 60% of the way there. This part works, this part doesn't work. You need to add this, take care of that, get rid of that, and try again." And so you go through a few more of these iterations of developing this product, and ultimately you have something that the customer just loves. And they're going to use it, they're going to tell all their friends about how great it is, and suddenly you're on the way to building a new a new growth curve, or you're sort of heading in the right direction. So that approach is not very often used by CEOs. But that is in my view, they should combine that concept with the value pyramid concept to make sure that they are working on things that are kind of closer to the top of that pyramid, in order to create the new growth curves that I think are so important.
No, that example couldn't be more true in the legacy, businesses that we work with.
Yes.
But just the chief AI officer, it's the same thing when they hired the chief data officer. Figure out our
Yes.
data monetization strategy,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
right?
I mean, what does
And they
that
would,
what does that even mean? It's like,
right.
I mean,
And
they feel they need to do something because it's the cool buzzword. All the kids are talking about it at the board meetings. I got to do this too, otherwise I'm going to be left behind. And they love to be able to delegate it to the chief data officer or the chief A officer, because then when it fails, they can say, "Well, I didn't have, that was just they didn't they were got paid them a lot of money, and I thought they knew what they were doing, but they didn't do it." And that is a what they used to call, there was this car called the Chevy Nova, which turned out to be a bad name because it means doesn't go in Spanish. So
Nova, that's right.
yeah, so that is what that is. That whole approach is a Chevy Nova, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's product innovation in in the four walls of your building. And
Yeah,
then the next point you made, which will lead me to a next phase of our conversation, is that team you talked about. Let's just call it the steering committee or whatever it may
yeah,
you want to call it.
hmm,
It really does need to include all core functions, including marketing and sales,
yes,
because again, if they're the closest people to the customer in
hmm,
terms of feet on the street, on the phone, and
yes,
um, and so it can't just be the product development team and the data team and the AI team. So it's really getting that team correct.
yes, and I think it's also um, true in some industries that you have a CEO who comes out of one of those functions. And so they are privileging people who are in the function that they came out of and treating them as a special form of royalty. Whereas other people who may be very important to the success of the product development are kind of thought of as basically an afterthought. We'll get them involved. But one of the things that I've learned in my years of being in the world is that whoever you leave out of one of these teams is the one that will get you. You need to involve not everybody, but you have to be judicious to make sure that everybody who you invite is going to be important to the success of the product. And if you have to leave somebody out, don't leave them out completely, and consult with them. But it is a bit of a balancing act to make sure that you have a large enough team to incorporate the key people, but not so many people that you never get anywhere because everybody has to be satisfied. So
No,
it's a
absolutely.
process challenge. But having said that, you really need to recognize you need to be able to look at the company from the outside in. Look at it from how would the customer view the team that you're putting together, given their experience working with the company. Which of the functions are most critical to their getting value from this product? And that's something that's very hard for somebody who's been a CEO and grown to become an executive in a company for many years. It's hard for them to see the company from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with the channel the CEO goes up.
Yes, yes,
And Bill McDermott, I believe, was a sale came up the sales channel.
yes. I would guess he was a salesperson. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's very
Um,
salesy. Yeah,
yeah. So the way you and I met actually is I was posting blogs and a podcast about what we really excel in here at H2K Labs, which is data driven revenue growth, right? It's how we're
mm-hmm.
using data and AI to improve how you are acquiring, retaining, and making revenue highly profitable, efficient, and like a growth engine, right? Once you
Yes,
land the new account.
yes,
And AI and data, that you can't have AI without the data. I actually think there's a powerful play there.
yes.
What do you see? Do you see companies looking at it that way, or is this like not on their radar?
I see some companies that I've talked to, that are probably the best ones that I've talked to, recognize in fact, the CEO of one of the companies that I talked to recently was talking to my class yesterday, and he had this idea, um, which is that AI can help you deliver the service that will make the after sale service that will make the customer experience so good, so they'll be so happy with your service that they will give you a high net promoter score, and they will recommend you to other people, and they will also eagerly buy more things from you over time. So that is definitely an idea where AI is at the core of this company, and that idea of I basically come back to the idea of the purpose of a business is to create and keep customers. Um, and that idea, I have not really seen so much people using AI to create customers, although I think that that will happen when companies are able to build products that use AI in a way that creates so much more value. I had this concept in one of my books called the quantum value leap, a huge, like a tenfold increase in the ratio between the benefits you are providing the customer to the price. So that is what value is, and a tenfold value leap. Anytime you can do something of that order of magnitude in terms of creating more value, and that this company that I was talking to is called Tech C, and it was he was telling me about how he was doing something for a large telecommunications company that was basically creating 47 times more value than the price they were paying for the technology that he was providing them. Being able to measure that is a crucial. That's a very important insight. Being able to
Hmm.
measure the ratio between the measurable value that you're creating for a customer and the price that they're paying. That you can create a customer by actually doing that, by showing them, you're now using this product. Look at how much money you're saving, or look how much more revenue you're getting because you're using this product. That demonstrable, quantifiable provision of higher value than competing products is what allows you to get the customer. And what allows you to keep the customer is great service plus innovation. In other words, new products that solve new problems, new unmet needs that emerge over time with your existing customers. Those are the sort of things that you can use to grow, sustain increase your average revenue per customer, and to add to your customer base.
That point about the ROI has been a perennial problem with businesses that are not so tangible as like media and
Yes,
events. You're selling marketing
yes,
programs,
yes.
but there is ROI there. It's just very hard to identify. But now, I believe, again, the data plus the AI strategy,
Mm-hmm.
that actually is opening a huge opportunity to say it's not just I got you these impressions, these clicks, etc. It's I was able to one give you data on and easily like that on the customers that would be most predisposed to buy from you based on the behaviors we're seeing that converted over to you as a lead, for example.
Yes.
And that's just that's a base level example, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one great takeaway from this. I think the second one you actually brought up earlier, and I talk about this a lot, and that is there's this concept in sales, which is you have an A, a B, and a C part of your sales team.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Your C's are probably you're always going to get rid of after a certain period of time because they just aren't going to do well. The B's
Mm-hmm.
are this sort of there's potential, they're doing okay. Um, they're not where the A's are, who are hitting quota and overachieving it. And those A players have habits and say things and do things over and over and over again, right? They have developed the right habits. And again, I used to lead sales teams, so I don't think you're naturally born a salesperson. I mean, I think some people are, but others learn it. And so if you can actually take that with AI, like, oh, how many phone calls or when do they get the proposal in? And is it 48 hours of a turnaround? Like, again, it seems so fundamental, but if you could take those behaviors and help coach the B players, you're not only pushing up more people who are hitting quota more. And so that's a huge metric, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You actually are reducing your cost of attrition.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. I mean that is also true in customer service, which also has high turnover.
Yeah.
And you raise another point when you were talking about the sales function, I was thinking there's another aspect of this, which is you can hire salespeople to bring in new customers, and then you can have salespeople that will make sure that those customers are satisfied and keep buying after you bring them in. I don't know whether you have people who can do both, but to me, that those are both areas where the expertise of the people who are good at landing a new customer would be something that would be good to have in an AI, and the same concept applies to people who are good at servicing the customer that other person brought in, to make sure they keep buying. Is that there might be accumulated wisdom and expertise of the best people at doing that. And so for both those kinds of salespeople, you could in theory have an AI that would up the game of everybody, the new people. And yes, if they don't perform, they ultimately become expensive failures that you have to hire new people again. And it's very frustrating. In fact, this reminds me of a story, which I'm paid to talk as a professor. So this is a quick one though. There was a guy named Lou Cern who was a graduate of Dartmouth, where my daughter went, and he started a company. He grew it to a certain point. He couldn't scale it anymore because it was so expensive to hire a salesperson for a six-figure amount. They would train for 6 months. They would leave either to go work somewhere else, or they failed, and they'd have to do it all over again. So he didn't have capital to scale the company. So he decided to create a new company called New Relic, which is so he kind of rearranged the letters of his name to call this company New Relic, which basically gave away the product for free to developers at a small scale, so he wouldn't have to have salespeople. And the salespeople would be those developers who would use the product, love it so much that they would go to their boss and say, "Can we get a version of this that can work for a larger group of people?" So he took the expense of those salespeople who were turning over and turned it into shifted the locus of who does the selling to internal selling. Give it away for free, let them sell it, and then it was much more efficient and easier to scale the business.
Oh, I love that. That is brilliant. My
I
head's
thought it was
spinning right
amazing.
now.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting to the close of this. I have one last question, which is there the mindset that worked and the skills that worked as a leader, 5 years ago, isn't really the same today. Like, what do you see in your mind are the top three critical must-have skills that a CEO and even the C-suite team this person hires has to have today that may feel different than 5 to 10 years ago?
Well, I will tell you that for the last couple of last year or so, I've been trying to figure out what makes the difference between all the founders who end up turning over and not making it to taking their company public, and the ones that end up founding a company, taking it public, and running it 3 years after it goes public or more. It turns out that only 0.4% of the founders fit into that small category of people who are still running the company 3 years after it goes public. And so I was trying to figure out what makes the difference between those people who make it, that 0.4%, and the other 99.6%. So it turns out I knew about 10 or 15 of these CEOs, and I started interviewing them. And then I interviewed a couple, 10 or 20 more, just to sort of confirm. And there's one thing that sticks out, and that is what I call cognitive hunger. And I think cognitive hunger is the thing that really matters. And I think, it's more important now than it was, 5 or 10 years ago, because there's so much new stuff going on. And so that raises the question, what does cognitive hunger mean? And what is the opposite of cognitive hunger? The opposite of cognitive hunger is cognitive lock-in. It's basically the idea that what I was successful at, what got me promoted to CEO was X. And so therefore, every time I see a problem, the solution is X. Don't tell me it's Y. Don't tell me it's anything but X, because otherwise I'm not going to listen to you. And eventually I'm going to realize I don't even need you around anymore. So there's a lot of CEOs like that. The ones with cognitive hunger are saying, you know what? I have to, if I'm going to attract and motivate the best people, I need to listen. I need to shut my mouth and open my ears. And I need to listen. I need to learn. I need to learn new things. I need to figure out what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I have to be honest about that. I need to hire people who are better at me at all the things that are important to the success of the company and empower them. And essentially, always be looking at what's next and what we need to learn in order to be successful at that. So all of that, I mean, in my book, I had 5 different things that you have to be good at, and the difference between how somebody does them with cognitive hunger versus cognitive lock-in. And I had sort of a compare and contrast. And then I applied this framework to a couple of generative AI startups that I analyzed in the book to sort of say, these are the ones the ones with the cognitive hunger are the ones that I would be more inclined to want to invest in. Notwithstanding that I, didn't know their financial condition, but I knew that what I was seeing in the mindset of that cognitive hunger is the key concept. And fortunately, for people who buy the book, they will see what that actually means in practice for 5 different, very specific things that CEOs do, and also some case studies so they can kind of realize, well, do I have this or don't I have it?
That is a great way to. I love that concept of cognitive hunger. And I actually, by the way, bought your book. It's arriving at my house today.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
So I'm excited to read it.
Yeah.
I would
I'd
have
love
read
to
it
know.
before, but those stupid hurricanes got in the way.
Yeah, I
Um,
was going to mention, my parents just went down there. They have a place down in something called Longboat Key.
oh,
And
yeah.
that was definitely, they got some water.
Oh, yeah. All of the keys, unfortunately, but I think they're coming back. So, all right, just a few things. I like to do this at the end and then we'll close it out, but just a few
Okay.
rapid fire questions.
Yes.
Um, what is the most unusual place you've ever been to?
I would say that it was probably a castle in the northeast corner of Romania. It was a castle they brought in a German king, and we got there on these ATVs. We saw bears in the woods in the Carpathian Mountains, and there we were in this castle, which was spectacular. And I had no idea it existed. That was very unusual.
I've heard so many great things about Romania. I'm dying to go. So, what's the best book you've read besides your own?
Well, I'm a big fan of The Power Broker by Robert Caro. I thought
Okay,
that was amazing.
it's next on my list then. And I guess my final one is tea or coffee.
Definitely coffee.
Man after my own heart. All right, perfect. Well, listen, it's been a delight having you with us today.
Thank you, Heather.
And for our listeners, again, we do this podcast twice a week. We also have some great content on our website, h2klabs.com, underneath the revenue room construct. And also, you can find the link to register for Revved Up 2025, h2k.com/Revved Up 2Vs. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.